Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Game.Set.Chat. I am Chanda Rubin.
I'm Zena Garrison.
And we are so excited to have the guest that we have on today, Kim Clijsters, one of my absolute favorite people in the world. And I mean, I have said that about some of our guests, but you really are one of my favorite people. And I'm so happy you've joined us. Thank you for stepping in and chatting with us today.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I've been listening to you when you're doing your commentary, and I've been following both of your tweets. And it's just nice to feel a little bit more of a connection, I guess. Especially in these times where, and with me not having played a lot in the last few months, it's nice to stay a little bit updated about everything that's going on. So I'm really happy to be a part of this today.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me.
Well, Kim, I'm going to go right in because I'm going to help you remember who I am. I actually do. I was a Fed Cup captain when we played you guys in Belgium. And remember, the whole team got sick, and I came to you for translation to make sure I had a bucket. Make sure that I had a bucket to get through the match. But I've always, admired your play, but more than anything, what I admired about you, people literally say you're the nicest professional player ever, and I agree with them.
Well, thank you very much. I think I have, I think Chanda knew my dad, and maybe my mom a little bit less, but my father was somebody who traveled, with me to a lot of tournaments. And I think it's something, as I get older, you think about those things a little bit more. And now that I'm a parent too, you think about the influence that, you maybe sometimes take for granted when you're younger. But you realize as you get older that, certain values that you get taught. And, my parents were always very, very big on, it doesn't matter, how famous you become or how much money you make, or, that doesn't change who you are. It doesn't make you better than anybody else. And I think that is, a main life lesson that, I take from them and pass that on even to our children. So I think, a lot of that starts there. And, I've always loved being on tour. I love playing. There were parts of it that, I struggled with, just like anybody else. And, I think I just love playing tennis. To this day, I still love playing tennis.
Well, I have to say, having played against you and you kicked my butt a few times, you had the killer instinct. So let's not get it twisted. You were nice, but you weren't that nice on court. And so I just want to put that out there, which is how you have to be. I mean, you've got to kind of have that balance and be able to compete hard, give your best. But at the end of the day, it's about good sportsmanship. It's about acknowledging the other player. And I just think you did that better probably than anybody out there. You just had that good balance. And I can definitely understand, because your dad was such a quality person, loved him. And I can understand kind of where you got that base from, but it was pretty special. It's not easy for players in that competitive space to have that.
But, at times it was even confusing for me, because people, especially in the press conferences, people would go on and talk to me about, do you think you're too nice to win a Grand Slam? When I lost my Grand Slam finals, and I just was really confused. And I was like, no, like, why, it's not that I'm nice to my opponent while I'm playing. I have that drive to win. I still want to beat them, but I have no issue with my opponent. If I get beaten, if I beat them, there's no difference in that for me. And I don't need to hate my opponent to feel better or to play better. I think it was more of an internal drive. And, I always said, even, when my coaches at the time, I would say, like, oh man, these people, they think that I'm like the nicest person. If only they could read my mind,
Yeah, they didn't play you. They didn't play you. So, we're going to cut them a little bit of slack.
Yeah. But I mean, but at the end of the day, I think it all, comes down to like respect and treating people with respect. And I've seen examples on tour where you see other players, treat the locker room ladies with disrespect, and treat people from the WTA tour with disrespect, or the ball girls. And that gives, like, even now, like, it gives me chills. Like, it's not a good representation of who we are as women and on our tour. And so that was definitely something that I didn't want to be a part of.
Well, it's really interesting because I was that player that, oh, you're so nice and everything, is that why you never won the Grand Slam? So it was really refreshing to see someone like you that when you did, she's nice and she did win a Grand Slam for younger players to hear that. But you know what? When I first saw you play, and I still today, I just imagine you doing a split on the court, getting back up, and then hitting an amazing shot afterward. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I just did it. I think it was like the last solution for me to be able to reach, to get to that shot. And maybe growing up on clay where, we learn how to slide a little bit better. And I guess I just got confused with the surface. But I think, just something that happened, and it got me through. It was a couple of really big moments in matches, and at times where it was really close and you were able to just get that last shot back when your opponents thought, maybe they could hit a winner and they would miss an easier volley or a drive volley coming into the net. And it just kind of became a little, almost like a trademark in a sense where now we see a lot of people do it. So it's not like, it's that unique or you need like a special talent to be able to do it. But it just, I think once you get a hang of it, it's actually pretty easy. Like we see more and more people do it. And so it's not.
Well, you got to be really strong with your legs. You got to be flexible at the same time. No, that's not that easy. But I mean, respect, because that was I think, one of the strengths of your game was your ability to move and retrieve, but then go from defense to offense. And a lot of it had to do with that flexibility. Now, before we keep going, I know we've got some diehard tennis fans who you need no introduction. They know your resume. But for those of you who don't, and I hope the diehards kind of humor me here, but for those of you who don't know Kim quite as well, I want to just give you the highlights of her resume. So she won her first Grand Slam in 2005. She's a 4-time major champ in singles. She subsequently won the US Open 2 more times, and then the Australian Open when she came back out of retirement. She has a couple of Grand Slams in doubles. She was #1 in both singles and doubles at the same time. Okay, like that is ridiculous. And of course, she was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and that was in 2017. So we've kind of talked about, you winning your first major and kind of, the questions, Kim, you faced about maybe being too nice to win. Was it a little bit of validation when you kind of won that first one, when you kind of finally got a bit of that monkey off of your back?
It definitely was. I think the feeling that I had, obviously the first feeling is that pure joy, but then I guess afterwards when you start doing your, everything, the press and you get to be with your team, and it felt like a relief to be able to kind of say, okay, now, I've done it, because you can tell yourselves as much as you want that, okay, just keep doing your thing, keep working hard, your next opportunity will happen if you keep doing the right thing because you're on the right track. And until it happens, it's, and the more people talk about it in the press, and you try to avoid it as much as you want, but, when you get confronted with it, in certain times, and you kind of feel that around you, every press conference before the tournament starts, and then during the tournament, and the build up to, oh, what if you play, Serena in the semifinal, or what if you play Justine in another final? And so the lead up to it, you can kind of, it's not that easy to just switch it on and off when you go into that like press room. So it does kind of stick around a little bit. So I think for me, winning my first one was definitely, one where I was like, okay, I got the first one, so that was like, no more of those questions.
Well, you got the first one, plus #1 in the world. I mean, that's Hall of Fame already right then and there, right?
But I think what bothered me, or not bothered me, but what I started to focus on the most, or started to think about a little bit more, was that I became #1 before I won a Grand Slam. Yeah. So I think that was something like, do you feel worth being a #1, that you're not, that you haven't won a Grand Slam, and those kind of things. So I think, I never thought about those kind of things. I was still very young. When I came on tour, I was a teenager. I love to play tennis. And so you gradually grow into, all those things, and you have to learn to deal with it. And so, it's, it's definitely, it's a learning process to get to, if I would have won my first Grand Slam final that I played against Jennifer, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I wasn't emotionally ready to handle that, what comes with it. And So in a sense, although I was really close and it would have been great to have won, I'm very happy that I didn't at that time yet.
Well, I want to talk about 2009 when you came back and you beat Serena. First of all, you coming back, everyone was talking about you just had a baby and you come back and you beat Serena. But then that match was like so weird in so many ways, the way it ended. But once again, true to form, you were an unbelievable champion during all that. But you know what? To me, everyone talks about now all the rules that have been put in place for mothers. I think you started it.
Look, I grew into kind of that role where, you become a mother that started playing again, and which, it's never something that I expected. I didn't think when I retired the first time that I was going to play tennis again. And because, so many things happened, but I was still so young. And I started, having that hunger a little bit again. And I was like, okay, let me train and let's get ready. But it was a very emotional year for me as well that year where, I lost my father, at the start of that year, started training, preparing, had a newborn who was, I guess, almost a year old at that time. So it was an extreme roller coaster, even for me, that year. So with emotions and dealing with everything that comes with being in the spotlight again and being, under, with attention all the time. And so that tournament was, again, it felt at a certain time very surreal. But it was after that tournament that I felt, obviously in Belgium, I've been used to being in the spotlight for many years. My father was a famous soccer player. We were kind of always, he was a soccer player with two tennis player daughters who, my sister also played tennis. And, we were always in the spotlight a little bit. And, but, it became a different level. So, after, that tournament, it was even more, and it was so much more international than, what I even had been used to the years before. I've had some amazing letters from women who were going through hard times after they had their daughter and didn't know how to get back and found motivation and just to find their passions and to stick with it and to stick through it. And so it's those kind of things that just become, you don't really think about it when you're traveling that much on the road and when you think about, the people that you influence. But when I stopped playing and I met a lot of the people who were cheering for me, in Belgium for many years, and people my age who were saying like, oh, when you were playing or when you were pregnant, I was, studying to become, to find my passion again. And so it's just the connections that you make or that you trigger in people is something that I never really thought about until, I guess, as you get a little bit older.
Did you know Yvonne Goolagong had won it first, was the first mother?
Yes,
Did you know that?
yes. Yeah, it was actually through my my Fila. I was wearing Fila at the time, and I wore her outfit dedicated to her. So it was in 2011, I think, when I won the Australian Open. So it was an incredible moment because, obviously you can't write that story because I wore her outfit and then I ended up winning as a mother as well. So I was able to meet her and talk to her during that Australian Open. So it was a very special occasion. Of course, having been in Australia for a few years in my life, I got to know and learn more about the impact that she's having, not just that she has on the tennis court, but that she just has, within Australia and within the community. What she's doing for her community is incredible.
Well, I have to tell you, I literally just got chills when you said that. I mean, just like, once again, back to two of the nicest people that I had ever met were both you and her, but just simply amazing.
Yeah.
But
the impact has been phenomenal that you've had as well. And I'm curious, Kim, because you kind of touched on your family and you talked about your father a couple of times here. When you retired in 2007, you would come back in 2009, but you had a lot of impactful events happen kind of during that period. You kind of got married in 2007. During that time, you got pregnant, had a baby, you got to spend time with your father when he was going through his illness. How much did those situations, those impactful life moments kind of influence the person you would become the second half of your career, the player you would become the second half of your career?
I think they had a huge impact on me. I think as tennis players, and especially being a young tennis player on the professional tour, you grow up quicker than a lot of other people do, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But things get sped up a little bit. You don't you don't a lot of times get to think about things too much because it goes so quickly. And for me, when I was, I think 23, 24, when I retired, it just became too much being in that environment and constantly being available for everybody and doing this and going to do this sponsorship event. And it just became so much more than just playing tennis for me, which drained me to a point where, physically I started having injuries. I started, I wasn't enjoying it. And for me, that's been a big part of, is I need to enjoy what I'm doing and to be fully dedicated to your sport. You have to be able to enjoy it. So I think the retirement definitely also changes you a little bit to learn about yourself and making that decision. My father being sick, having Jada, being a first-time mother, it was all very impactful. And but I think what you learn in those kind of moments is as a human being, because I'm not the only person who goes through hard times in their life, not at all. And it's not because I'm a tennis player or because I'm more known that those times are harder for me. No, everybody goes through moments like that. And I think what I learned out of those moments is how well human beings can adjust.
You came back and you'd won 1 Grand Slam before you retired, and then you came back and you won 3 more. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal, just from that standpoint. I don't know that we've ever really seen, that happen in this sport. So, clearly mentally and emotionally, you were in the place you needed to be. And it was because of, those decisions and the time you took for yourself. And I'm curious because Zina mentioned that you beating Serena, in 2009. I mean, that was kind of a crazy match. Right?
Crazy.
Like, what are your real thoughts on how that happened?
My real thoughts, honestly, I had no idea what was going on. So I missed even the part where she got the warning, I guess, after the first set. And so I missed the whole, because you try to, I tried to stay in the bubble, not a COVID bubble, but like my bubble. and I just was so confused because I saw her arguing and I saw her talking, and then the referee come out, and I just turned my back because I was like, Kim, just focus, don't lose focus, don't start getting distracted about anything. And then when I turned around, Serena walked over, and she said, I'm done. And I was like, no, don't, it's, I still to this day, it was a very surreal kind of moment. And hard to, even for me at that time, going into a press conference and talking about it. And so let alone for me, it was hard to talk about it. And for her, it must have been, even harder, obviously. So it was a very, besides the fact that I felt like we were playing a great match and we were, really playing a high level match. It was unfortunate, really unfortunate that it had to end like that.
Yeah. How do you kind of maintain the focus when something like that happens? And then you've got to, move on, and you've got to kind of stay in your groove.
I've always believed in when you do a press conference or, it's okay to share your emotions. I feel like there's so many interviews and press conferences given where people are just answering, but they don't really want to be honest. And so for me, I felt like I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm not going to be any different. And in a way, I think that helped me too, to be able to, kind of release it in that sense where you can talk about it. And, I think it helped me in that way to kind of, whether it was in the press conference or talk to even people afterwards, who were talking to me, other players, or, there's no,
interest. Yeah. So you move on a little easier.
In that particular moment, I never forget, I used your face to a couple of players that I was coaching because I could tell how focused you were. You did not know what was going on, and you were so into the moment, which is a great thing. But I also want to ask you about, so when you were in the midst of retiring, I know you tried some coaching and you did some commentating, and Shannon and I we've been in a similar situation as well. I don't know about for you, but for me, it's always been a little difficult because I wasn't in control. How was it for you?
First of all, I always said I would never do commentating because I felt like it's so easy to comment on players, you know, oh, you should have done this, and they're, you know, a lot of times we don't know half of the things that are going on in the player's life. And so I always felt like, you know, I think more the human side of things kind of held me back a little bit at times. And so that's why I think when you see past players do commentary, I love it because they talk, there's a certain understanding and in a way, I guess, respect for, you know, understanding that there is so much more that's going on in the players' lives than what is happening than just that tennis match at that moment. I've loved, you know, being a mom, and I feel very lucky that I've been able to mom that hasn't had to go back to work because of financial reasons, or like I've been able to stay home, you know, with the kids and bring them to school, drop them off at school, cooking, the whole thing. Like I've enjoyed that, but at the same time, I've also, you know, especially when our third, Blake, when he started going to school, you know, and then me traveling a little bit and playing some legends here and there, doing some commentary and talking to players, talking to the past players that were traveling on tour as well. And it kind of just triggered a little part of that, I guess, the competitiveness or even the challenge of seeing, you know, what am I capable of doing? You know, I would hit once in a while with some players that would come to my academy, or, you know, when I would travel, you know, some players would be like, hey, do you want to have a hit? Can I hit against you? And I'm like, sure, I would love to have a hit. You know, I enjoy doing that. And yeah, kind of felt like, okay, you know, it would trigger sometimes. And then I would go home and I would be like, no, it's impossible, you know, with the 3 kids and with this. And I would talk to Brian, my husband, and he was like, well, you know, you got to, if you want to do it, you got to start doing something.
Did I read somewhere that Martina, when you were playing on the Legends Tour, Martina told you need to go back out?
Yeah.
We all thought, first of all, we all thought that. When I played in that same, I'm like, what is she doing here? Okay, that is not the same level that the rest of us are at this stage of our lives.
The guys, the past players on the ATP tour, they have this whole tour, right? They travel the world and they play all these. I was like, why don't we have this? You know, why don't the women, you know, why don't we have, I don't know, what do they call it? The ATP Legends Champion Store. Yeah. And I was like, that would be fun for, you know, a lot of women to do. And if they're up for it. So I started playing with the Legends and I thought it was more, you know, I thought the Legends, the first time I remember going to Paris and, you know, they said, okay, you're paired with Martina. I was like, okay, cool. So we hit the night before our first match, I went to have a hit with her. And I'm like talking to her, I'm like, Martina, so how serious, like, do they take this? And she's like, no, this is very serious. Like, this is.
No, Martina is very serious.
I'm like, oh. So I was like, I didn't know it was this serious. I thought,
no,
you know, we're
Kim,
having fun.
the rest of us weren't. The rest of us weren't that serious. You could have cut us some slack.
So I was like, okay, like this is serious. I gotta get like ready and get my mind like a little bit ready. And I didn't even know if I had to take match clothes to do this. You know, if I was allowed to do this in like my shorts and the t-shirt. So yeah, so I enjoyed it. I mean, I've been lucky to play with Tracy. I played with Natalie Tosia a few years ago. So I mean, it was all fun, but it got heated at times. I was like, ooh, like.
Well, you did say Martina. I mean, we are talking about Martina, but we did.
I played against her. I sorry to interrupt, Tina. I played against her. I think it was in Australia or something, and I hit this like off forehand, but I only used my arm, right? I ripped it like through the middle. And she's like, oh, that's not fair. You should be playing on the tour. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, you know, your volleys are way better than mine. Like your volleys can still go on the WTA tour, you know? So it was just a very funny moment. And we laughed afterwards and we hugged and it was just, very funny. But I have to say, it's those kind of moments that do trigger you, you know, to kind of, to see what triggered me to be in this situation now that I'm in.
Well, I want to tell you, we actually did have a Legends tour way back when. I played with Chrissy, Martina, Tracy
Oh,
Payton,
really?
and Martina, everybody. But when you guys start hitting the ball so hard, then we immediately got rid of it after the next level was to come through, like Lindsay and all of them chanting you
Yeah.
guys. So what are some of the things that you would like to pass down to, after you get finished all your stuff that you're doing, pass down to some of the younger players coming up?
Well, I think what I've always enjoyed is when even somebody like Chanda, when I was a teenager, when I wasn't nobody, like no, she was always very helpful and in giving tips. Even Benny, your coach, I remember, the advice and the support, and I love doing these kind of things. I have coaches, on the tour who come and say, hey, can you record a video for, a young player who's struggling, and things like that. It's just something so small, but you can make such a difference if you can record a video. I think it's those kind of things. If I can help in any way to share my experience and share my struggles with them as well, and realize that as women we are good at adjusting, and we are good at doing what's right. I think a lot of times, and for me too, I had really had to learn to say no and to, put myself first.
That is such, it's incredibly, incredibly large idea, but, people kind of take that for granted, where, you have to experience that and go through it. And that makes you a better person to be able, to achieve things later. And you've certainly shown that, especially when you consider your work with your academy, starting that and the influence you've had on current players that are playing on the tour now, players that you may end up playing that, you have influenced and you've helped. And it's just phenomenal that you're able to have that attitude. And we could go on and on, Kim. I mean, honestly, I'm looking at time. We got to go, though. We said we wouldn't keep you that long. So again, thank you so much. We appreciate it so much.
No problem.
You sharing this time. And it's just been a lot of fun chatting with you today.
Thank you. It's been really good to see you. Thank you, Zena. Thank you, Chanda.
Thank you. And we want to thank all of you for watching. Please continue to follow Game.Set.Chat. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can leave comments. We love when you do that. And definitely join us next time for another episode.